Happy Thursday, everyone. So, I thought I'd do a bit of a gentle reminder for those of you who are trying to make some better choices with your food. Um, and that is the number one nutrition principle. You'll hear a lot of things like, red wine is better than white wine, spinach is better than romaine, grains are bad for you, and, things that just sort of seem to make eating food really complicated and much more complicated than it needs to be, right? So if you find yourself being a little bit overwhelmed around what information is right and what to try and so on, then just try this one thing first. And that is to try and eat mostly, or at least more, minimally processed foods. Now, most people would define this as choosing foods close to how they found them in nature. So whole foods such as like sweet potatoes and broccoli and potatoes, chicken, apples, etc., etc., right? And why? Well, the reason, one reason is the greater the degree of processing, the more likely the food has some sort of lost nutrition, particularly fiber or essential fatty acids. And I think I've talked before about, even just the fact that omega-3s and omega-6, if that's being out of balance, the impact it can have on you, other vitamins and minerals, and, basically any other kind of nutrient, right? And then, more processed foods obviously have additives such as sugar and refined starch, unhealthy fats, extra salt that you don't need, preservatives and fillers. And another reason is that diets that are rich in, kind of minimally processed foods are linked to lower rates of heart disease, cancer, depression, and type 2 diabetes, right? So they're pretty good reasons. And number three, minimally processed foods tend to be richer in fiber and protein, lower in calories per volume, and these foods make it easier for you to manage your caloric intake, but more importantly, also leave you feeling more satisfied, feeling better, more energized, and that sort of thing. So I think the key here is a lot of people kind of try and eat for, weight loss. The trick is to kind of eat for performance and energy and what makes you feel good, because the rest will kind of fall into place after that anyway. And obviously, the less processed the food, the kind of more nutritious they are, they improve your overall health outcomes and they help regulate your appetite. There's just one problem with this, right? And that is, it's really hard, particularly when you live in a Western society or a modern society, to eat only whole foods. And in fact, depending on what type of goals you have as well, it would be kind of redundant and unnecessary. So the way to think about this is that there's no good or bad. It's not a binary way that we look at food. So think of things or foods, like with most things, on a continuum. So, not all foods are 100% fake or fresh from the dirt, right? Like even if you think about some of the way that we store certain fruits and vegetables and that for a lot longer, they're kind of modified to a degree to be able to last longer on the shelves and so on. So there's always a degree of processing that happens, right? Like even the cuts of meat you get from the butchers are the way that they're, the process in which they get to that stage, has some things done to it. And that makes sense as well, right? So sometimes there's a balance between mitigating bacteria and the spread of disease, and losing some nutritional value through some of those processing methods as well, right? So anyway, the whole idea here is then to kind of eat more minimally processed food rather than just limiting yourself to them. And what you want to try and do is just look at the foods that you're currently eating and just try and move along the continuum. So choosing foods that might be slightly less processed to start off with than what you would usually eat, and then replacing meals as you need to, or just adding more fresh fruit and vegetables is a great start, right? And I guess the other consideration is as well is that some processed foods are actually pretty awesome and pretty good and pretty economical. So things like whey protein powder and tinned fish can help you get some extra protein, keep your bank balance down, and are quite easily digestible and easy to add into your existing food, right? And they're also great kind of like, tuna, for example, or biltong or something like that. They're great kind of emergency go-to packets, of snacks. So things even like serves of nuts and so on. It's always good to have a healthy option on hand in case you don't know when your next meal is, you're out and about and you get lost for time and, maybe skip the times that you would normally eat lunch, for example. And also, right, like processing can also actually involve simple things as cooking, chopping, and blending, because that is actually processed food, right? So not all processed food is terrible. It's just the degree of stuff that they do to it. The stuff that is a little bit worse for you is the ultra processed food. So, the things that like, cereal puffs and electric blue energy drinks, and pretty much anything that's like really shelf stable for over a year are usually specifically engineered to make these foods very delicious as well. So they're hyper palatable, which means that you get this hit of kind of like sugar and salt and over the top flavor. And because they don't have much nutritional value to them as well, they're easy to overeat. So anyway, moving along. Yeah, the whole idea is you don't have to go from one extreme to the other. The idea is just to look at what you're doing and make small changes over time, because it's going to be easier in terms of habit stacking and so on, and it'll keep you sane. And then the whole idea as well is that doesn't mean that you have to then give up the things that you really enjoy. In fact, you can be a little bit more strategic about them and making them a little bit more intentional and delicious. And I'll talk about that in another live. So let me know if you've made any changes to your diet this year and what's one of the things that you're going to try and do consistently.